All right, folks, we're back on the mat today looking at a brand new set of decals by Furball Aero. Fantastic decal printer, designer, maker. Looking at some markings for one of my favorite subjects in the world, the YF, and you see here they've slashed it, the F-23 Black Widow. Because what they've done is they've done a great favor for modelers, and they've given the actual markings for the YF-23 that was seen, but they've taken some of the work out of what if modeling, and they have given us what if markings for many potential projects, assuming what if the F-23 had entered into service. And I took these out already and looked at them. They are beautiful, and I've made a what if F-23 before, because I believe, having, again, I always say this, served my time in and had access to look in some databases and records and really looked up some of the program files from back in the day. The F-23, and I'm not alone in thinking this, a lot of people, even if you don't have the ability one day to jump on a SIPR platform or higher to actually look up the specs, just do an online research. The F-23 Black Widow, it was a beast, and a lot of people even today will still argue that the Air Force made the wrong choice in selecting the F-22 Raptor as the winner of their Advanced Tactical Fighter program. And so I know most people that clicked on this video probably are very familiar with what the F-23 is. Some people may not. So I'm going to give a very, very abbreviated history of the YF-23 and the program. I mean, but if you don't want to know that and you just want to jump right into the review and looking at these markings, there'll be a time code in the video description to tell you exactly where to go to skip the history lesson, to skip the technical beeps and squeaks about the airplane, and go straight to the decals. Talking about the YF-23 and the amazing aircraft that it was, so good in fact, that very, very recently, I'm not going to put an actual date on it, but decades after the original design, there were some aerospace engineers and companies thinking about reigniting this design itself and modifying it into a current day fighter, not for the US, but for allies and potential joint projects. I mean, it is awesome. So to understand the F-23 and why it's loved by so many, you got to go back in history a little bit. Now, in December 2005, the F-22 Raptor entered service as America's, and still current to this day, air dominance fighter. Now, prior to that, we have had air superiority fighters. We have had dog fighters. We have had interceptors. But we had never had an aircraft that was specifically designed to dominate the battle space the way that the F-22 has and does. And it was the culmination of a lot of research and a long time on the drawing board and testing. In 1981, the US Air Force initiated a program that was then codenamed Senior Sky, and the idea was to work on what they called the Advanced Tactical Fighter. This was something that was supposed to replace both the F-15 and the F-16 in the roles of offensive counter-air and defensive counter-air, what we call OCA and DCA. OCA and DCA are the missions to both go out and strike an enemy, to degrade their air fighting capability, whether that is fighter sweeps, air-to-air, whether that is going out and attacking an enemy airfield, whether it is attacking their support systems to maintain their fighting edge in the air, or whether it is defensive in nature, whether it is combat air patrols, whether it is responding to an enemy movement. But if you see, these are all the missions that the F-22 does today. It can do deep strike. It can do penetration. Not a large bombing campaign. It doesn't do interdiction. That's the role of something else. But it can go out and strike enemy command and control radar systems. It absolutely can go out and do a fighter sweep. And it can hunt down enemy aircraft most of the time before they even know anybody's there. And they absolutely can maintain a defensive patrol over an airspace to engage anybody that the enemy chooses to send our way. These are just some of the missions included in OCA and DCA, but in general, that's kind of what it involves. The key things that the ATF program was going to focus on was going to be the ability to supercruise, which is to go very fast above the Mach, above speed of sound, without having to engage afterburner, so in a more fuel-efficient way, and to incorporate stealth, which I hate, but that's the words that they used. I like low observable. Stealth implies that it's invisible. There's no such thing as invisible. We have low observable technology. Sorry, I kind of choked on that one. Low observable technology. At a certain aspect, at a certain range, everything's going to show up on a radar. It's just a matter of how big and where you have to be in relation to that object and how much power you have to use to see it. Because remember, there's always, even if all the electronic sensors fails, there's always the Mark 1 eyeball. And even if it gets up close and personal, the F-22 Raptor is not a small airplane. It's a very big dark gray airplane in a light blue sky against white clouds with a shiny gold canopy. And in a lot of red flag exercises, weapon school exercises, and just other general, sorties, training sorties, often, if it was detected by the enemy, and more often than not, they'd say, did you get a detect? Part of the debrief process. Did you get a detect? If they say yes, they ask them, what's the nature of your detect? And 9 times out of 10, it's visual. And it's, I saw sun glint off the canopy, or I saw you silhouetted against a cloud, or something like that. But again, that's another video. During this program, the ATF program, Senior Sky, the F-22's only competition when it came to the final choices and fly-off was Northrop's F-22 YF-22 Black Widow. And you know what? And even the name, it never was officially named the Black Widow 2. That's just the name that came to it. They were called PAV 1 and 2, Prototype Air Vehicle 1 and Prototype Air Vehicle 2. And in fact, they were named. Prototype Air Vehicle 1 first flew on August 1990. While they were choosing the actual airframe, they were choosing between engine types. Pratt & Whitney and GE were also competing in this whole fly-off. PAV 1 was equipped with the Pratt & Whitney engines, and it was actually named Spider. It was a dark gray aircraft overall. PAV 2 first flew in October 1990, equipped with GE engines, and they called it Gray Ghost because it wore a paint scheme very similar to the Compass Ghost Gray, the two-tone color scheme. The name Black Widow 2 came as an accident almost. There's a ram air scoop underneath the airframe, and PAV 1, some enterprising engineer painted the red hourglass on that ram air scoop to help maintenance personnel not hit their head on it on the ground. It just so happened it looked like a Black Widow Spider. It was already called Spider up in the air. And it just so happened, Northrop, having the history of designing and producing the P-61 Black Widow, famous night fighter from World War II, it just sort of was a natural association. Northrop engineers, after seeing it the first time in the air during the fly-off, immediately ordered it to have it removed because they were kind of afraid that would be too showy. But the name Black Widow stuck with it because of that one decision by one individual. The name Black Widow was never actually official. It was never given to it. But anyway, the fly-off lasted from 1990 to 1991. Over 50 missions between the two Black Widow prototypes. Here I am using the name. They did solo missions, just basically flying for data, flying against engineering specs, and they actually did fly-offs against the YF-22. Intercepts and mock dogfights and everything. And here's the hell of it. Here's what it comes down to. On 23 April 1991, the YF-22 was deemed the winner. From that moment right there, a lot of the people involved in the program, a lot of the people observing the program, and a lot of people analyzing data afterwards said, I don't know if this is the right choice. Lockheed Martin had a lot of political clout at that point. The thing is, if you look at the raw data and you look at how it was collated later, the YF-22 had a higher alpha. It could operate effectively at higher angles of attack than the YF-23 could. It was faster in both super cruise and max speed. The max speed of the YF-23 to this day, to this point, is still classified, not at the secret level, at the top secret level for that design with a certain set of engines, is still a top secret data point. It was stealthier, it was harder to pick up in a wider variety of aspects than the F-22. And it's theorized that based on the design, now this is something that you really have to work out with computers and more data, but it's theorized by everybody in the program that the YF-23 would have had longer range, would have had longer endurance, would have had what we call more playtime. That's the word we use officially in the military. It's a brevity word. Playtime is the actual amount of time expressed in minutes or hours and minutes that an aircraft can sustain itself, with fuel and a mission. But here's what happened. One day, the Lockheed Martin team said, we're going to go on up there, we're going to fire a Sidewinder, we're going to fire an AMRAAM, we're going to show them that we can do it. Even though it was not part of the test regime, even though nobody required it, the Lockheed Martin engineers knew that the YF-23 had outperformed the F-22 in the YF-22 in a number of areas. And they said, we're going to surprise everybody. We're going to add this in. We know it's not required, and we know it's technically not judging criteria for this fly-off, but we're going to do it. Now, the YF-23 probably had every capability to load and fire those missiles. I mean, the plane was built for it, but again, it was not listed as something the plane had to do. So Northrop didn't log or order or bring any armament with them. They didn't book it into their test program at all. And this is a real coup for Lockheed, because they showed that this plane can do exactly what it's supposed to do in combat. And even though it's not supposed to count, it's like in a courtroom trial when the judge says the jury will disregard that last statement. You can't disregard seeing this plane in its developmental form flying up and launching air-to-air missiles perfectly. And it really did, even though it shouldn't, kind of put the YF-23 at a disadvantage. And it was too late for Northrop to do anything about it. The other thing that really tipped the scales in Lockheed's favor was that in the close-up world, within visual range, the dogfighting realm, the F-22 had a higher degree of close-in maneuverability than the YF-23, because the YF-22 was built with thrust vectoring engine nozzles and the YF-23 was not. And so in those close-up dogfights, the F-22 was able to outmaneuver the YF-23. Here's the real sketchy part about that, though. Like, I get it. Dogfight maneuverability is important, but by doctrine, by training, by tactics, we don't teach our F-22 pilots, our aircrew, that they should be all in on the dogfighting thing. They get high and they get very fast and they take their shots at range. And then, well, I can't really describe the exact tactic because, classification, but they then close in unheard and unseen and destroy the enemy. And if they wind up in a dogfight situation, if they wind up in a visual fight, merged, having to turn and burn, they have screwed that up. That's not the way they employ. The way an F-15 or an F-16, to even those guys these days, like they're very capable of turn fighting. It's completely contrary to how we fight an air-to-air fight. If the enemy gets to within knife fighting range, because specifically the Su-27, the MiG-29 are such excellent turn fighters, they have good off-bore sight capability, high off-bore sight capability with the helmet-mounted sight and the AA-11 Archer. We never want to let them get within a position where they can use those weapons and that capability. So the whole development of the AIM-120, which was going on, obviously, they were able to shoot a developmental AIM-120 off the rail of the YF-22, is to never let an enemy get that close. So for that to have been, as they say, such a big deciding factor, really is kind of a sketchy, weird thing to say. The higher speed, the stealthier operation, the longer range, and the high angle of attack capability and everything, that is exactly how F-22s operate today. And with the F-23 having that capability over the F-22, really, in the minds of a lot of people, should have made the F-23 the winner. On a technical note, it was determined that the engine and engineering combination of the winning Lockheed entry basically was just a lower risk technically, and they ran more efficient program management of it, which is absolutely what a bean counter would be looking for. Maybe not a tactician and maybe not a warfighter, but for somebody counting dollars and cents and airframe numbers and you know, doing all of that logistical stuff, that would really matter to them. So the debate still really rages on among many, including those in uniform today. It's not been that long since I hung up my uniform and gave up my access to information. You'll still find people in the United States Air Force today arguing, did we make the right decision, and what would have life been like if we got the F-23 Black Widow 2 over the F-22 Raptor? And, you know, was it a legit win, or was it a administrative and political win? Let's get into here. So first, let's take a look at the decals themselves. So looking in here, you've got tail flashes for 12 individual bases. Do we have multiple units, like different units at a specific base? I don't know. But we've got basically units all over the world, from Alaska, in Europe, Florida, we've got New Mexico, we've got Idaho, we've got Virginia, we've got California, Japan, Nellis. Is that MT? Is that Minot? We put in F-23s at Minot? That's crazy. I mean, we've got Germany, we've got a lot of different options, all sorts of different options. If you take a look at your different shields here, we've got options. I believe it looks like Air Combat Command, and then some going all the way back to Tactical Air Command. That's really cool. I mean, as always, listen, the quality of Furball Aero printing is always precise, is always beautiful. Everything's in register. Nothing is ever skewed or out of place. Few favorites for me, just from my career. We've got the Gunfighters, the 366th, up in Mountain Home, Idaho. I spent 8.5 years there. There we go, 390th, the Boers. They flew F-15Cs up until they decided to go to an all-Strike Eagle platform at Mountain Home. We've got 65th Aggressors. Having been a weapons school graduate at Nellis, I love seeing that. We've got the 33rd Fighter Wing at Eglin, which I love because when we were at Tyndall, we were actually a tenant unit. We belonged to the 33rd, to the Nomads at Tyndall, doing our training in the schoolhouse there at the 337th. Just a whole lot. And you can see you've got beautiful tail flashes. You've got markings for the original YF-23, and I would assume both of them, Gray Ghost and Spider. You don't see, you see some very colorful ones, but for the most part, because of what the what if we're going to do real world Raptors, what they'd be painted in would mostly be a very similar gray scheme like the F-22s. So you see that most of the markings, stars and bars and everything else kind of reflects that. I think the most colorful examples we're looking at, so for Beale BB, we've got some colorful markings, and you know, they at Beale they fly reconnaissance, but they also have T-38s that are painted black with red markings, so that guys that are not going to fly those very, very expensive planes can still get their flight hours in between. So I guess that's where that comes from. If you know, we'll look at the actual pictures in a minute, but beautiful, beautiful. We've got Pratt & Whitney and GE insignia. They would go with the actual YF-23s. Gorgeous decals though, and of course, carrier film so thin you can barely feel it or see it. You got a couple inserts here in the package. A few no steps right there. And then, what are these? Are these paint masks? These tail number paint masks? I believe they are. For nose gear door numbers and tail numbers. On to the actual markings that they provide you, the different marking schemes. So, for the most part, it is the exact same color scheme that the F-22 would wear. So we've got a What If 5th Fighter Interceptor Squadron at Minot. I'm glad to know that I still recognize the MT. That's great. We haven't had a fighter interceptor squadron in the U.S. Air Force for quite a while, but cool tail markings there. We've got the 49th Fighter Wing at Holloman. Very famous. If you know what aircraft they flew that was very, very famous, go ahead and throw that in the comments in the video if you feel like showing off. At Elmendorf, they fly Raptors right now. Elmendorf, home, well, it was for a while home of Red Flag Alaska. They do a lot of it out of Eielson now as well. Been up to Elmendorf on TDY. Beautiful base. Only cold place I ever would have liked to have been assigned. Langley, First Fighter Wing, of course, the Balloon Busters. That's what they're going to be known as from now on after the Chinese weather balloon. Soesterberg Air Base. In, oh, if I get this wrong, correct me, Holland? They've been disbanded for quite some time, but they were an F-15C squadron up there, and their whole job was basically a DCA squadron, defending NATO lines against Warsaw Pact fighters coming in over the line in the whole Cold War thing. We've got the famous ZZ tail flash from Kadena. These guys also F-15 squadrons, a pair of F-15 squadrons out there. They're going to be some of the last F-15s in the active duty inventory. I think they're slated maybe to get the F-15EX. I'm not sure though, but that looks pretty good. Bitburg in West Germany, very famous Eagle squadron. They were going to be one of the prime defenders of NATO, flying their C model F-15s in the big war in West Germany. And then Eglin, 33rd Fighter Wing. So they are famous right now. They were one of the very first F-35 wings stood up. And so when we were, like I said, a tenant unit of the 33rd Fighter Wing, training our new guys over at Tyndall, and we got to work. I say got to like it's a present. Let's see, what years? From about 2015 to 2017, got to participate in the dumpster fire. I was there the day the engine just caught on fire doing nothing on the runway, that one plane, and I was there the day where they realized that they had to keep the F-35s in a constantly heated hangar because the batteries they chose would not function. And yeah, it does get cold in the panhandle of Florida sometimes. And they had to keep that hangar heated to a constant 72 degrees to make sure the plane would turn on. It's doing much better now than it did then. I love Mountain Home. I spent 8.5 years at Mountain Home as a gunfighter. Lakenheath is switching out their Eagles for F-35s, but they fly Strike Eagles, and they have retired their last Eagle in favor of the F-35. And here it is, that black and red paint job that looks so good. It also, when I first saw that, I thought that this was going to be an aggressor bird, because there's that really good aggressor look with the 64th. That's all black with red markings, but that is standard Beal black with red markings. That looks really sweet too. I like that a lot. Very pretty looking. So the 65th Aggressor Squadron has been up and down and up and down, and they flew some old F-15Cs with some really great paint schemes to represent flankers at Nellis, but they were very expensive to maintain, so they deactivated, and they only just recently reactivated to fly the oldest ass F-35s we have in the inventory to represent the supposedly stealthy J-20. But this is a really nice look at a 65th Aggressor Squadron F-23, and I could see them doing this too. We don't have any Aggressor F-22s because, quite frankly, we never bought as many as we really needed because bean counters and budget watchers. But this is a really nice scheme. Of course, this is very reminiscent of the Su-57 Felon. So that would be beautiful. So now, of course, I need to get myself 5 or 6 new 148 kits, and there's only one company in the world that makes 148 kits of the YF-23. There are some things on the YF-23 that were never intended to be in the full fighter version, like some pitot tubes and some other things that were for testing only. That there's a great video where they walk around and talk about that. I'm not sure where it is. If I can find it, I'll put a link in the video description. Here's your Spider and your Gray Ghost right here, the originals. Sorry, I keep drifting off that side of the screen, but I'm trying to read at the same time. So Spider and Gray Ghost. Remember, there's Spider with the hourglass. This is what caused the whole Black Widow name. That was never really official. When they put them in air museums, I think that's where the Black Widow name really picked up, and they still call them Black Widow to this day. You can decide which one you like better. The all gray look, PAV 1 or PAV 2. And then on the other side, we have all the stenciling markings. If you get your hands on the 148 kit, it's a big plane. It's bigger than an Eagle. Smaller than, I'd say, a flanker, just a little bit, but bigger than an Eagle. It's a nice sized kit to work on, and it's got some nice detailing in the kit. It goes together pretty well, and these decals will just be awesome on it. And what I love is that we don't have to play the what-if game, scrounging decals from other kits, because basically you can put together just about everything from right here. So that's awesome. So I think this is fantastic. I'm so excited to get this in. The day I saw they offered this, I ordered the sheet so I could take a look at it, and I'll probably order 2 more sheets just so I love the F-23. Again, having looked at some of the official specs and things online, I absolutely, as a former member of the United States Air Force, as a guy who graduated weapons school, as a dude whose weapons and tactics was my profession, I think the Air Force made the wrong choice. But that is my personal opinion, and I speak on behalf of only me. And I had some really good times in the vault of the 422nd at Nellis after missions, just discussing it with some of the actual Raptor pilots up there, because they've got some hot opinions on it. They really do. So what do you guys think of these markings? Who's excited to make some of these what ifs, or who's just excited for a really nice, really well done aftermarket set of markings for the actual real things? Because of course the kit comes with the markings, but they're much heavier and much thicker than what Furball gives you. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the history lesson. I hope you enjoyed the look at the markings. I'm going to be enjoying making quite a few, especially this one, definitely this one. I might use the Beal markings, the red markings, and then some other markings from another set by somebody else to make a Wraith Aggressor out of this all black Aggressor. Just get some Nellis tail letters and another flash and everything. That would look awesome. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks. Do me a favor, if you enjoy hearing my history spiels and all that, along with the modeling stuff, like, subscribe, share, all that same stuff. I don't normally review sets like this, but I just got it in my hands and I couldn't help it. So catch me again soon for another build. And remember, everybody out there in YouTube land, working on your own, keep building and build them well. And I'll be back for the next project real soon.